The epic journey of coca and cocaine, from ancient Andes to modern America. Ancient origins before arriving in the United States. Although the question specifically concerns the United States, understanding the origin of this substance requires us to embark on a fascinating journey through thousands of years of human history, spanning continents, cultures, and civilizations. The dawn of coca use in pre-Columbian America. The story of coca begins in the misty highlands of the Andes Mountains, long before recorded history, in an era when humanity was just beginning to establish the foundations of complex civilization. The first documented mentions of coca leaf usage date back to approximately 3,000–2,500 BCE, during the remarkable Norte Chico civilization, also known as Corral soup, which flourished along the arid coastal valleys of present-day Peru. This civilization, one of the oldest in the Americas, contemporary with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, left behind evidence of coca consumption in the form of lime containers and textile bags, specifically designed for carrying coca leaves. Archaeological excavations at sites like Huaca Prieta, conducted by renowned archaeologist Junius Bird in the 1940s, and later teams in the 1970s and 2000s, uncovered coca leaves preserved in textiles and pottery, dating back to this extraordinary period. These discoveries revolutionized our understanding of ancient Andean societies, revealing that coca was not merely a plant, but a cornerstone of their cultural, spiritual, and economic life. The sacred leaf in Andean civilizations. As centuries passed and new civilizations rose in the Andes, coca's importance only grew. The Chavin culture, approximately 900–200 BCE, centered in the northern highlands of Peru, incorporated coca into their religious ceremonies and shamanic practices. Intricate stone carvings at Chavin de Huantar, the civilization's principal ceremonial center, depict figures with bulging cheeks, the unmistakable sign of coca chewing, suggesting the leaf's central role in their spiritual rituals. The Moche civilization, approximately 100–800 CE, which dominated the northern coast of Peru, left behind stunning ceramic vessels and murals that provide invaluable insights into coca's cultural significance. These artifacts show elaborately dressed individuals, likely priests or nobility, engaged in coca consumption during important ceremonies. The Moche understood coca as a gift from the gods, a bridge between the earthly and divine realms. Later, the Babasaaram Tiwanaku, approximately 300–1,000 AD, and Wari Arsta, approximately 500–1,000 Surusia Wislas empires, which controlled vast territories around Lake Titicaca and beyond, established extensive trade networks specifically for coca distribution. They recognized the leaf's economic value and its utility in maintaining social cohesion across their diverse populations, which spanned from coastal deserts to high mountain plateaus. The Inca Empire and coca's Golden Age. The apex of coca's pre-Columbian importance came with the rise of the Inca Empire. Approximately 1438–1533 Sikuru, known as Tawantinsuyu in the Quechua language. Under the rule of legendary emperors like Pachacuti, reigned 1438–1471, Tupac Inca Yupanqui, reigned 1471–1493, and Huayna Capac, reigned 1493–1527, the Incas built the largest empire in pre-Columbian America, stretching from modern-day Colombia to Chile. For the Incas, coca called Mama Coca, Mother Coca in Quechua, was profoundly sacred. The leaf was believed to be a divine gift from Andi Inti Omna, the sun god, and Mama Quila, the moon goddess. Only the Sapa Inca, the emperor, high priests, nobility, and those granted special permission could chew coca freely. The imperial government maintained strict control over coca cultivation and distribution, designating specific valleys with ideal microclimates, particularly on the eastern slopes of the Andes as exclusive coca-growing regions. The Incas understood coca's remarkable practical properties. Chewing the leaves mixed with an alkaline substance, typically lime from burned shells or plant ash, released the plant's alkaloids, reducing fatigue, suppressing hunger and thirst, and critically for populations living at altitudes of 3,000 to 5,000 meters, alleviating the debilitating symptoms of altitude sickness, known as soroche. This made coca indispensable for the chasqui, the empire's relay runners who carried messages across vast distances, for workers constructing the empire's magnificent stone cities and extensive road networks, and for soldiers in the imperial army. The traditional method of coca consumption, the ancient method of consuming coca, refined over millennia, involved carefully selecting mature leaves, drying them in the sun, and then chewing them slowly with a small amount of alkaline substance stored in a specially decorated gourd called apoporo or ishkuporo. This process, called chachar or pichar in Quechua, was both a practical activity and a ritualized social behavior, often performed communally during rest periods, meetings, or ceremonies. The mild stimulant effect experienced through traditional coca-chewing bears virtually no resemblance to the powerful effects of purified cocaine. Users reported a gentle, sustained energy, mental clarity, and a sense of well-being that could last several hours without the intense euphoria, addiction potential, or health risks associated with the refined alkaloid. The Spanish conquest and European discovery. The coca story took a dramatic turn with the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. Francisco Pizarro, along with his brothers and a small force of approximately 168 men, arrived in Peru in 1533, and through a combination of military tactics, political manipulation, and devastating epidemics of old-world diseases, conquered the mighty Inca Empire within just a few years. The Spanish chroniclers who accompanied or followed the conquistadors, including Pedro Chiesa de Leon, who wrote extensively about his travels through Peru between 1550. Bernabe Cobo, whose massive Historia del Nuevo Mundo was completed in 1653, and Garcilaso de la Vega, El Inca, whose royal commentaries of the Incas appeared in 1609, documented their encounters with coca use with a mixture of fascination and horror. Initially, many Spanish authorities condemned coca as a diabolic plant that fostered idolatry and superstition. The Ad First Council of Lima, in Fithen, debated banning coca entirely. However, Spanish colonial administrators soon recognized coca's economic potential and its utility in controlling indigenous labor. The devastating Mita system, a brutal form of forced labor in the silver mines of Aupotosi, discovered in Aftit, and mercury mines of Huancavelica, relied heavily on coca distribution to workers. The Spanish rationalized that coca helped miners endure the horrific conditions while suppressing their hunger, thus reducing food costs. By the late 16th century, the Spanish crown had reversed its position, and coca became a significant source of colonial revenue. The Catholic Church itself became one of the largest coca producers, with church lands dedicated to cultivation, generating substantial income through tithes. Coca reaches Europe. Limited early interest. Despite coca's importance in colonial South America, the leaf itself generated minimal interest in Europe for several centuries. Several factors contributed to this indifference. The leaves lost most of their potency during the long sea voyage to Europe. The active alkaloids degraded rapidly. Europeans had no cultural context for understanding or appreciating coca's subtle effects, and the leaf's bitter taste held little appeal to European palates accustomed to sugar, coffee, tea, and tobacco. Some specimens reached European botanists and naturalists during the 17th and 18th centuries. The renowned Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus first classified the coca plant in 1750 as erythroxylum, though he worked from imperfect samples. The classification was refined in 1786 by French botanist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who more accurately described Erythroxylum coca-shoendi. Occasional European travelers to South America mentioned coca in their accounts, notably the German naturalist Alexander von Humboldt, who explored South America between 1799 and 1804, with French botanist Aimé Bonpland. Humboldt's observations of coca use appeared in his monumental work Personal Narrative of Travels to the Equinoctial Regions of America, published in multiple volumes between 1814 and 1829. However, even Humboldt's prestigious scientific reputation couldn't generate significant European interest in the leaf. The 19th century, the chemical revolution begins. The true transformation of coca's global significance began in the 19th century, during the golden age of alkaloid chemistry. European chemists had recently learned to isolate active principles from medicinal plants. Morphine. From opium poppies, isolated by Friedrich Serturner in Dab 1804. Noquinine, from cinchona bark, isolated by Pierre-Joseph Pelletier and Joseph Caventou in Darbadans 1824. And bacicaffine, from coffee, isolated by Friedlieb Ferdinand Runge in Darmpoir 1819. The first significant attempt to isolate coca's active ingredient came from Friedrich Gaedtke, a German chemist who in 1855 successfully obtained a crude extract he called erythroxyline. However, Gaedtke's extraction method was imperfect, and his sample contained numerous impurities. The breakthrough came in 1859, 1860, when Kust Albert Niemann, a PhD student at the University of Göttingen, working under the supervision of the renowned chemist Friedrich Wöhler, famous for synthesizing urea and thus disproving vitalism, successfully isolated pure cocaine hydrochloride for the first time. Niemann's doctoral dissertation über eine neue organische Base in den Coca-Blättern, on a new organic base in coca leaves, published in 1860, described the isolation process in detail and documented the numbing sensation cocaine produced on the tongue, an observation that would later prove medically revolutionary. Tragically, Niemann died in Arawat, Kegsi-1, at just 26 years old, never knowing the profound impact his discovery would have on medicine, society, and history. His colleague Wilhelm Lossen refined the isolation process and, working with other chemists, began determining cocaine's chemical structure, though the complete structural formula wasn't fully established until 1898 by Richard Willstetter, who would later win the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1915, primarily for his work on plant pigments, particularly chlorophyll. Coca gains medical and scientific attention. The successful isolation of pure cocaine sparked growing interest among European physicians and pharmacologists. Dr. Paolo Mantegazza, an Italian neurologist and physiologist, conducted some of the first systematic medical experiments with coca leaves during his travels in South America between 1854 and 1858. Upon returning to Italy, he published Sulle virtù igieniche e medicinali della coca e sugli alimenti nervosi in generale, on the hygienic and medicinal virtues of coca and on nervous foods in general, in 1859, enthusiastically praising coca's potential medical applications and even suggesting it could cure various ailments and enhance human performance. French chemist Angelo Mariani revolutionized coca's popularity in Europe with his invention of vin mariana. In d'Estepe 63, a Bordeaux wine infused with coca leaf extract. This tonic wine became phenomenally popular, endorsed by celebrities including Pope Leo XIII, who allegedly awarded Mariani a gold medal, Thomas Edison, Jules Verne, Alexandre Dumas, Arthur Conan Doyle, and even Queen Victoria. Mariani's success demonstrated that coca could be commercially viable in Europe and, eventually, in America, laying the groundwork for cocaine's eventual arrival in the United States. By the late 1870s and early 1880s, European physicians began prescribing pure cocaine for various conditions, though systematic medical research was still limited. The stage was set for cocaine to make its dramatic entrance into American medicine, culture, and ultimately into one of the nation's most challenging public health crises. This ancient leaf, which had sustained Andean civilizations for 5 millennia, was about to undergo a transformation that would change it from a sacred, communal tradition into an isolated chemical compound, and eventually into a substance that would profoundly impact American society in ways the ancient Andeans could never have imagined. The journey of coca from the sacred mountains of the Andes to the laboratories of Europe spans more than 5,000 years, encompassing the rise and fall of empires, the collision of civilizations, and the inexorable march of chemical science. This ancient botanical, once inseparable from the spiritual and practical life of millions, was being reduced to a pure white crystalline powder, a transformation that would set the stage for its controversial arrival in the United States and its complex legacy in American history. The discovery of cocaine and its journey to the United States, a transformative era, 1850-1890. 2. The chemical revolution and cocaine's path to America, 1850-1880. The European scientific context, the age of alkaloid discovery. The mid-19th century represented a watershed moment in the history of chemistry and pharmacology. Europe was experiencing an unprecedented scientific revolution, particularly in organic chemistry and the emerging field of pharmacognosy, the study of medicinal drugs derived from natural sources. Universities in Germany, France, and Austria had become global centers of chemical innovation, attracting brilliant minds who would fundamentally transform humanity's understanding of how plants affected the human body. This era witnessed the systematic isolation of powerful alkaloids from plants that had been used medicinally for centuries or millennia. The isolation of our morphine Maas from opium by Friedrich Zerturner between 1804 and 1817 had demonstrated that a plant's medicinal properties could be concentrated into a pure chemical compound, dramatically increasing both therapeutic potential and danger. This discovery inaugurated a new age in medicine and sparked an international race to identify and isolate active principles from other medicinal plants. By the 1850s, chemists had successfully isolated numerous alkaloids. Strychnine from Nux vomica, 1818, by Pelletier and Caventou. Quinine from cinchona bark, 1820, also by Pelletier and Caventou, revolutionizing malaria treatment. Caffeine from coffee, 1819, by Friedlieb Ferdinand Runge. Nicotine from tobacco, 1828, by Carl Ludwig Reimann and Wilhelm Heinrich Posselt. Atropine from belladonna, 1831, by Heinrich F. G. Mein, and Enkima from opium, 1832, by Pierre-Jean Robiquet. Each discovery opened new therapeutic possibilities, while simultaneously introducing new dangers through the availability of concentrated, potent substances. 1855-1860, the first steps toward isolating cocaine. Friedrich Gedke's pioneering work, 1855. The first documented attempt to isolate coca's active principle came from Friedrich Gedke, also spelled Gedeke in some sources, a German chemist and pharmacist working in the mid-1850s. Little is known about Gedke's personal life. He remains one of history's more obscure scientific figures, but his contribution to cocaine's story is undeniable. In Haverbodenpfeffer, Gedke published a paper in the journal Archiv der Pharmazie, Archive of Pharmacy, describing his successful extraction of an alkaloid substance from coca leaves. He named this substance erythroxylene, from the coca plant's genus name, Erythroxylon. Gedke's method involved treating coca leaves with various solvents and acids, following procedures similar to those used for isolating other plant alkaloids. However, Gedke's erythroxyline was far from pure. His extraction process yielded a crude mixture containing cocaine, along with other alkaloids and plant compounds. The substance appeared as a yellowish, waxy material, rather than the pure white crystals that would later characterize refined cocaine. Nevertheless, Gedke recognized that he had isolated something significant. His samples produced numbing sensations when applied to the tongue, suggesting potential medical applications. Gedke's work attracted modest attention in German pharmaceutical circles, but failed to generate widespread excitement. The impure nature of his extract, combined with a limited understanding of its properties and potential applications, meant that erythroxyline remained a chemical curiosity rather than a medical revolution. Moreover, obtaining sufficient coca leaves for experimentation remained challenging. Most samples arriving in Europe had degraded during the long voyage from South America. Their alkaloid content significantly diminished. Albert Niemann's breakthrough, 1859-1860. The true scientific breakthrough came 5 years later, achieved by a brilliant young doctoral student named Albert Niemann. At the prestigious University of Göttingen, in Germany. Born in Darandos 34. In Goslar, Germany, Niemann entered Göttingen to study chemistry under Friedrich Wöhler, one of the 19th century's most distinguished chemists. Wöhler himself was a scientific legend. In 1828, he had synthesized urea from inorganic compounds. The first time an organic substance had been created artificially, thereby disproving the doctrine of vitalism, which held that organic compounds could only be produced by living organisms through some mysterious, vital force. This achievement fundamentally changed chemistry and earned Wöhler lasting fame. By the 1850s, his laboratory at Göttingen had become one of Europe's premier training grounds for aspiring chemists. Niemann began his doctoral research on coca alkaloids around us at 15. Likely at Wöhler's suggestion, the choice of topic reflected both men's interest in natural products chemistry and the growing, albeit still limited, curiosity about South American plants. Niemann had access to higher quality coca leaf samples than Geidke had used, possibly obtained through Göttingen's networks of naturalists and explorers. Working with meticulous care in Wöhler's laboratory, Niemann developed an improved extraction and purification process. His method involved 1. Maceration. Soaking dried coca leaves in dilute sulfuric acid mixed with alcohol, which helped break down plant cell walls and dissolve the alkaloids. 2. Alkalization. Adding sodium carbonate to the acidic extract, which converted the cocaine salts into the free base form, making them soluble in organic solvents. 3. Solvent extraction. Using ether or chloroform to extract the free base cocaine from the aqueous solution. 4. Crystallization. Evaporating the organic solvent and treating the residue with hydrochloric acid, forming pure cocaine hydrochloride. A stable crystalline salt that appeared as beautiful, prismatic, white crystals. The results were spectacular. On his tongue, Niemann noted, the isolated alkaloid produces a numbing sensation on the tongue and leaves a peculiar, somewhat bitter taste. This observation, seemingly simple, would prove historically momentous, as it pointed toward cocaine's future use as a local anesthetic. Niemann documented his work in his doctoral dissertation, titled Über eine neue organische Basis in den Coca-Blättern, on a new organic base in coca leaves, which he defended in am 8. at the age of 26. The dissertation was subsequently published in the widely read journal Annalen der Chemie en Pharmacie, ensuring that European chemists and pharmacists learned of his achievement. In his thesis, Niemann provided the first accurate description of pure cocaine hydrochloride's physical properties, crystalline structure, melting point, solubility. The first chemical analysis suggesting cocaine's molecular composition, though the complete structural formula would take decades to determine. Documentation of cocaine's physiological effects, particularly the numbing sensation, a reproducible method for obtaining pure cocaine from coca leaves. Niemann proposed the name cocaine, from coca plus the standard alkaloid suffix -ein, which immediately gained acceptance in scientific literature. His work represented a quantum leap beyond Gaedke's crude erythroxyline. Tragedy and legacy. Tragically, Albert Niemann's promising career ended almost immediately after his triumph. In 1861, Just 1 year after completing his doctorate, Niemann died suddenly at the age of 26. The exact cause of death remains unclear. Some sources suggest typhus. Others mention complications from laboratory chemical exposure, not uncommon among 19th-century chemists who routinely handled toxic substances, while still others indicate an unspecified acute illness. Niemann never witnessed cocaine's transformation into a major medical tool, recreational drug, and social phenomenon. He never knew that his name would forever be associated with one of history's most controversial substances. His mentor, Friedrich Wöhler, who lived until 182, watched with mixed feelings as cocaine gained prominence in medicine and society, perhaps wondering whether his young student's discovery had been an unalloyed blessing. Refining the science. Further chemical work. 1860s, 1870s. Following Niemann's death, other chemists continued investigating cocaine's properties. Wilhelm Lossen, who had been Niemann's colleague at Göttingen, refined the purification process further in 1862, producing even purer samples and confirming Niemann's findings. Lossen also conducted more extensive animal experiments, noting cocaine's effects on the nervous system and cardiovascular system, though he lacked the theoretical framework to fully understand these observations. Throughout the 1860s and 1870s, several European chemists worked to determine cocaine's exact molecular structure, a challenging task given the limited analytical techniques available. Wilhelm Lossen proposed a partial structural formula in 1865, though it contained errors. Richard Willstätter, working at the University of Munich, finally established the complete and correct structural formula in Bai A90A, confirming that cocaine was a complex ester alkaloid with the molecular formula C17H2104. Willstätter's work on cocaine and other natural products eventually earned him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1915, the first total synthesis of cocaine, creating it entirely from simpler chemical compounds rather than extracting it from plants, was achieved in 1902 by Richard Willstätter. A feat that required years of painstaking work and demonstrated both cocaine's complex molecular architecture and Willstätter's extraordinary skill as a synthetic chemist. Dura, 1870-1880s. Cocaine becomes a medical phenomenon. Coca products enter commercial markets. While pure cocaine remained relatively scarce and expensive through the 1860s, coca-containing products began proliferating in European and gradually American markets. The most famous was Vin Mariani, invented by Corsican-born French chemist Angelo Mariani in 1863. Mariani's coca wine was ingenious in its formulation. He macerated fresh coca leaves in Bordeaux wine, producing a beverage that contained cocaine, the alcohol-enhanced extraction of the alkaloid, along with the flavor and cultural acceptability of wine. Each fluid ounce contained approximately 6 milligrams of cocaine, enough to produce mild stimulation without overwhelming effects. Vin Mariani became a spectacular commercial success. Mariani was a marketing genius who secured endorsements from an astonishing array of celebrities, leaders, and cultural figures. His promotional materials featured testimonials from Pope Leo XIII, who allegedly awarded Mariani a Vatican gold medal and appeared on a Vin Mariani poster, though the Vatican's actual involvement remains historically debated. Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Thomas Edison, the inventor who praised the wine's ability to help him work long hours. Jules Verne, author of science fiction classics. Alexandre Dumas, author of The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. Émile Zola, the French novelist. Sarah Bernhardt, the famous actress. Auguste Bartholdi, sculptor of the Statue of Liberty. Ulysses S. Grant, former U.S. President and Civil War general. William McKinley. Future U.S. President Mariani published elaborate books featuring these endorsements, complete with photographs and glowing testimonials about how Vin Mariani enhanced creativity, vigor, health, and mental acuity. The product became synonymous with sophistication and modern scientific progress. Vin Mariani's success inspired countless imitators on both sides of the Atlantic. By the dix-18, dozens of coca wines, tonics, and elixirs flooded markets in Europe and America. These products were marketed not as recreational drugs, but as legitimate medicines and health tonics, a crucial distinction that allowed them to gain social acceptability. Cocaine arrives in American medical literature. Pure cocaine began appearing in American medical and pharmaceutical circles during the bust 1870s, primarily through two channels. 1. Medical journals. European medical publications, especially German journals like Deutsche Medizinische Wochenschrift, German Medical Weekly, and Berliner Klinische Wochenschrift, Berlin Clinical Weekly, regularly featured articles about new drugs and treatments. American physicians who read these journals, and many elite American doctors, read German medical literature, as Germany led the world in medical education, learned about cocaine's properties and potential applications. 2. Pharmaceutical imports. American pharmaceutical companies, including Park, Davis and Company, founded in Detroit in 1866, E.R. Squibb and Sons, founded in Brooklyn in 1858, and McKesson, founded in New York in 1833, began importing coca leaves and pure cocaine from European suppliers. These companies recognized cocaine's commercial potential and began promoting it to American physicians. Park, Davis and Company became particularly aggressive in promoting cocaine. In 1884, the company's ambitious young executive, George S. Davis, hired prominent physicians to investigate cocaine's medical applications. The company began manufacturing various cocaine preparations, cocaine hydrochloride powder, coca fluid extracts, coca ointments, and even coca cigarettes, and distributed free samples to doctors nationwide, accompanied by promotional literature highlighting the drug's versatility. The medical establishment's initial reception of cocaine was cautiously optimistic. The drug clearly possessed potent physiological effects, but its appropriate therapeutic applications remained unclear. Some physicians experimented with cocaine as a treatment for morphine addiction, an ironic choice given cocaine's own addictive potential, alcoholism, equally ironic, digestive disorders, depression and neurasthenia. A fashionable 19th-century diagnosis encompassing various psychological and psychosomatic complaints, asthma and hay fever. Toothaches. Results were mixed, and systematic clinical trials, the foundation of modern evidence-based medicine did not yet exist. Physicians relied on personal experience, patient testimonials, and published case reports, a methodology that often led to over-enthusiastic adoption of new treatments before their dangers became apparent. 1884, the revolutionary discovery of local anesthesia. The problem of pain in 19th century surgery. To understand the revolutionary impact of 1884's discovery, we must first appreciate the state of surgery and dentistry in the 19th century. Despite remarkable advances in surgical technique, operations remained agonizing ordeals for patients. General anesthesia had been introduced in the 1940s. Ether was first publicly demonstrated by dentist William T.G. Morton. At Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston on October 16, 1846, in an operation performed by surgeon John Collins Warren. The demonstration, held in what became known as the Ether Dome, proved that painless surgery was possible. Chloroform was introduced by Scottish obstetrician James Young Simpson in 1847 and became popular after Queen Victoria used it during childbirth in 1853. However, general anesthesia had significant limitations. It required specialized equipment and trained personnel. It carried risks of overdose, respiratory depression, and death. Many patients feared the loss of consciousness. It was impractical for minor procedures. It couldn't be used for certain delicate operations, particularly eye surgery, where patient cooperation was needed. What medicine desperately needed was local anesthesia. A way to numb a specific body part while keeping the patient conscious and cooperative. Several substances had been tested, including ice and ether spray, but results were inconsistent and effects temporary. Karl Koller and the Vienna ophthalmology revolution. The breakthrough came in Vienna, Austria, in the summer of 1884, achieved by a young ophthalmologist named Dr. Karl Koller. Born in 1857, in Bohemia, then part of the Austrian Empire, now the Czech Republic, Koller had graduated from the University of Vienna Medical School in 1882 and was working as a junior doctor at the prestigious Vienna General Hospital. Koller was personally acquainted with Dr. Sigmund Freud, who was then working as a neurologist at the same hospital. Freud had become fascinated with cocaine and had been experimenting with the drug since receiving a sample from the pharmaceutical company Merck in Etipe. April 1884. Freud had been investigating cocaine's potential uses, particularly as a treatment for morphine addiction and as a general stimulant for treating depression and fatigue. In conversations between the two young doctors during the spring and summer of 1884, Freud mentioned cocaine's numbing effect on the tongue and mucous membranes, the same property Niemann had noted decades earlier. This observation sparked Koller's imagination. Could cocaine numb the eye? Eye surgery presented unique challenges. The cornea and conjunctiva are exquisitely sensitive. Even minor irritation causes reflexive blinking and tearing. Surgeons desperately needed a way to anesthetize the eye for procedures like cataract removal, glaucoma surgery, and corneal repair. Previous attempts at eye anesthesia had failed. Substances that numbed the eye were often too toxic or caused damage to delicate tissues. The momentous experiment. July 1884. Kohler began systematic experiments with cocaine solutions on animal eyes. Working in a makeshift laboratory, he prepared various concentrations of cocaine hydrochloride dissolved in water and tested them on frogs and rabbits, carefully observing the effects. The results were extraordinary. A few drops of 2% or 4% cocaine solution, applied to an animal's eye, produced complete anesthesia within minutes. The animals showed no pain response when Kohler touched their corneas with a probe, yet the eyes showed no signs of damage. The effect lasted 10 to 15 minutes, sufficient for many surgical procedures. On September 11, 1884. Kohler performed the first recorded surgery using cocaine as a local anesthetic, an operation to remove a growth from a patient's cornea. The procedure, performed at Vienna General Hospital, was a complete success. The patient felt no pain, remained conscious and cooperative, and recovered without complications. Kohler couldn't attend the Heidelberg Ophthalmological Congress, scheduled for September 15, 1884, where groundbreaking ophthalmological research was to be presented. Instead, his colleague, Dr. Joseph Brettauer, read Kohler's paper über die Verwendung des Kokain zur Anästhesierung am Auge, on the use of cocaine for anesthetization of the eye, describing the revolutionary discovery. The response was electrifying. Ophthalmologists immediately recognized the discovery's significance. Within days, surgeons across Europe were replicating Kohler's experiments. By October 1884, reports of successful cocaine anesthesia in eye surgery were appearing in medical journals throughout Europe and America. Rapid global adoption news of Kohler's discovery spread with remarkable speed, aided by the era's improving telecommunications. October 1884. Reports reached the United States. Dr. Henry Noyes, at the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary, performed the first American eye surgery using cocaine anesthesia on October 8, 1884. Less than a month after Kohler's presentation in Heidelberg. November 1884. Surgeons began experimenting with cocaine for other applications. Dr. William Stewart Halsted, at Roosevelt Hospital in New York, later the founding surgeon of Johns Hopkins Hospital and one of the Big Four founders of Johns Hopkins Medicine, began investigating cocaine for nerve block anesthesia, injecting cocaine solutions directly near nerves to anesthetize entire regions of the body. Halsted's experiments in air, November-December 1884, demonstrated that cocaine could anesthetize arms, legs, and other body parts, greatly expanding surgery's possibilities. Dentists immediately adopted cocaine for tooth extractions and dental procedures, finally offering patients relief from one of life's most dreaded experiences. December 1884. Oversee. 60 medical articles about cocaine anesthesia appeared in medical journals worldwide, documenting hundreds of successful procedures and exploring various applications. By the end of 1884, cocaine had been used for eye surgery, its original application, dental procedures, throat and larynx surgery, gynecological examinations and procedures, urological procedures, minor skin surgery, childbirth, though this application proved controversial due to safety concerns. Medical enthusiasm and commercial explosion. The medical community's enthusiasm for cocaine was unprecedented. The drug appeared to solve one of medicine's oldest, most vexing problems: how to perform necessary procedures without causing unbearable pain. Medical journals published ecstatic reports. The Boston Medical and Surgical Journal, predecessor of the New England Journal of Medicine, proclaimed in December 1884. The discovery ranks among the greatest contributions to practical medicine and surgery in this century. The Medical Record of New York declared, "Seldom, if ever, has so important a discovery been so rapidly disseminated and so universally accepted." Pharmaceutical companies responded with remarkable speed. Park, Davis & Company immediately ramped up cocaine production and began aggressive marketing to American physicians. The company's 1885 catalog featured pure cocaine hydrochloride in various quantities, cocaine solutions in different concentrations, coca fluid extracts, coca lozenges and tablets, coca ointments and salves, coca cordials, alcoholic tinctures, coca cigarettes, marketed for asthma and throat problems, coca chewing gum. Injectable cocaine preparations with syringes included other pharmaceutical manufacturers: E.R., Squibb, McKesson, Frederick Stearns and Company Ways. In Detroit, Park, Davis. Rivals competed fiercely to capture market share. Prices for pharmaceutical-grade cocaine dropped dramatically as production scaled up and competition intensified. P. Cocaine becomes fashionable in American medical circles. By the year 1886, cocaine had become not merely accepted, but fashionable in American medical practice. Young, ambitious physicians saw cocaine research as a path to professional advancement. Medical societies featured presentations on novel cocaine applications. Medical schools taught cocaine's use in their surgical and dental curricula. The enthusiasm extended beyond strictly medical uses. Physicians began prescribing cocaine for an ever-widening array of conditions: fatigue and exhaustion, depression and melancholia, digestive problems, seasickness, hay fever and colds, alcohol and opium addiction, sexual dysfunction, general weakness and debility. Patent medicine manufacturers, largely unregulated in this era, incorporated cocaine into countless proprietary remedies. By 1985, American consumers could purchase Coca-Cola, introduced in Goday 1886 by Atlanta pharmacist John Pemberton. Originally containing cocaine from coca leaf extract, marketed as a brain tonic and cure for headaches, though the cocaine was removed by Bus 903. Numerous coca wines imitating Vin Mariani, coca tablets and lozenges, coca containing cough syrups and catarrh remedies, cocaine-laced hemorrhoid preparations, toothache drops containing cocaine, cocaine containing asthma treatments. Most remarkably, these products were sold without prescription, without age restrictions, and with minimal warnings about potential dangers. The era's medical and regulatory philosophy emphasized individual liberty and minimal government interference in commerce, while the scientific understanding of addiction and drug dependence remained rudimentary. The dark side begins to emerge, 1885-1890. Even as cocaine's medical applications expanded and commercial success grew, troubling reports began appearing. 1885. Dr. William Stewart Halstead, the brilliant surgeon who had pioneered nerve block anesthesia, developed a severe cocaine addiction during his self-experimentation. He would struggle with addiction for years, eventually switching to morphine, itself highly addictive, as a substitute. Halstead's case, though not widely publicized at the time, illustrated cocaine's addictive potential. 1886, 1887. Medical journals began publishing case reports of cocaine habit, describing patients who had become dependent on the drug. These reports described increasing tolerance, requiring higher doses to achieve effects, psychological and physical craving, withdrawal symptoms including depression, anxiety, and fatigue, erratic behavior and personality changes. In severe cases, paranoia and hallucinations, later termed cocaine psychosis. 1887. The first reports of cocaine-related deaths appeared in medical literature, typically involving accidental overdoses during medical procedures or intentional misuse of pharmaceutical preparations. Sigmund Freud's experience with cocaine proved particularly instructive and ultimately embarrassing for the future founder of psychoanalysis. After initially promoting cocaine enthusiastically in his 1884 paper Über Coca, on coca, Freud prescribed cocaine to his friend and colleague Ernst Fleischl von Marxow, who suffered from chronic pain and morphine addiction. Far from curing Fleischl's morphine habit, the cocaine created an additional addiction and arguably hastened his death in Sessen, 1891. Freud's reputation suffered, and he largely abandoned cocaine research, a decision that inadvertently left Kohler to receive full credit for discovering local anesthesia. Despite these early warning signs, cocaine's medical and commercial momentum continued through the late 1880s. Regulation remained minimal, public awareness of cocaine's dangers was low, and the drug's enormous profitability created powerful economic incentives to continue promoting it. The stage was set for the next chapters in cocaine's American story. The emergence of a full-blown cocaine epidemic in the 1890s-1900s, growing public alarm, increasingly racist anti-drug propaganda, and eventually the regulatory crackdown that would culminate in the Sachdas Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, and cocaine's transformation from miracle medicine to prohibited substance. And the period from 1850 to 1890 witnessed cocaine's remarkable journey from botanical curiosity to revolutionary medical tool to emerging social problem. In just 4 decades, a substance unknown to Western medicine had been isolated, purified, commercialized, and integrated into medical practice and popular culture. The brilliant young chemist Albert Niemann could never have imagined that his doctoral research would launch one of the most consequential drug stories in human history. A story of scientific triumph, medical innovation, commercial exploitation, addiction, and eventually prohibition. Cocaine had arrived in America, and American society would never be quite the same.